Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Dee, your favorite self love and mindset coach. And welcome back to another episode of Eternal Evolution of Self. I have another fabulous guest with me today. This is Megan DeVito. Megan, I'm so happy to have you here. And she coaches around anxiety, and she's going to tell us all about how
Mhm.
to recognize what that feels like in our bodies today. Welcome, Megan.
Yeah. Hello. Hey, thank you for having me. It's so great to meet you.
Welcome. So
Yeah.
happy to meet you too.
Yeah. So my name's Megan, and I am a stress and anxiety coach. I work with a lot of women who are career oriented and goal oriented, but also on the flip side, I also work with a lot of teenagers. I'm a former teacher, and I help people learn how to recognize stress and anxiety in their bodies, but also all of the sneaky places it sneaks in their lives. And then just to learn how to trust themselves and to feel more confident so that they can move forward even when they feel anxious, instead of trying to constantly fight it off and make it go away, because that makes it so much worse and it hangs on longer. So that's really what I do as a coach, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And I'm so glad you brought up that we need not to fight it because I am a firm
Mm,
believer that we feel that struggle when we resist. So the resistance makes
mm,
it even more of a fight, if you want to put it in that way.
mm,
So, how would you encourage
mhm,
someone not to put up that resistance to their anxiety? Because I know that's kind of like a reflex action when we feel that.
mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I mean, a little backstory on me is that for years, I started. I suppose I developed an anxiety disorder maybe starting back in third grade, and I was incredibly anxious. I had a lot of health anxiety, all the way until I was about 40. I'm 47, and it was like once I figured it out, they say, "Oh, it takes years to figure it out," and yes. And it also takes an instant. And I think in the instant where I realized that I didn't need to stop it was a really breakthrough moment for me. So, one of the things that we all know is true is that it's really, really uncomfortable. It feels frantic. It feels desperate. It feels like we have to do something. We have to solve a problem. We have to make it go away. And when you get to a point that you just know, oh, wait a minute, I know this feeling. I know that I felt this before. I know that I'm safe. And especially for me, and one of the things that I really work with my clients is knowing what's actually happening inside your body when you feel so anxious makes it easier to be able to step back and say, okay, this is what I feel. I can work through it. I can shake my hands out. I can exhale and really exhale it out. And I can divert my thoughts to something else and let it work its way out on its own. But when we do everything we can to, I have to make it stop, I have to fix it, I have to call someone or Google something. Whenever we do those things, we're actually telling our brain that something is wrong. So the next time we feel those feelings again, we create these habits and we just do the same things on repeat. I live in Indiana. So in the winter when it snows, I always compare it to sledding. So for people who do live in a place where they're sledding, if you can picture, like, you start at the top of the hill, and the first time you go down, you go like 3 feet and then you stop because the snow's not packed down. And the more that we use that same path, the faster and the further we go. And that's really the way it goes when we learn an anxiety response, but also when we learn the flip side and we learn how to not respond. We just go back and we kind of prune those synapses inside of our brain, and we learn new ways to respond, which is really the important part in recovery.
Mm, I agree with you. So,
Mhm.
there's like all these thoughts tumbling over each other listening to you talk about that. One is, why do you feel that we humans think that we have to solve the issue? Like, is it that we're looking at it like something's wrong with us because we feel anxiety? Why do you feel like we have such a resistance and such a like quick response to let me fix this? I have to make this go away right now.
Mhm. So if you can picture, like a tiny little caveman living in the back of your head, like a little bitty guy who just lives back here. And if you can picture that this guy doesn't know that it's not way back in the caveman days anymore, and he's very fast and his only job is to keep you alive. So there's a movie called The Croods, and the dad in the movie The Croods is always throwing everyone back in the cave because he thinks that when the sun goes down, everything's going to burst into flames, or there's a saber-toothed tiger, it's going to eat you. It's going, all of the things out there are going to kill you if they make you feel uncomfortable, if you're afraid that you're embarrassed, if you're afraid that you're going to be locked out of the cave and not have food and shelter. So that part of our brain, that very, very primitive part, whether it's the lizard brain or the caveman brain or the critter brain, whatever we want to call it, is reactionary. It's incredibly fast. And its job is to get you, it's just to keep you alive. And unfortunately, alive might mean not embarrassed. It might mean nobody makes fun of me. I don't want to feel like less. I don't want to feel like an imposter. Anything that would make someone exclude us from the community, or that would actually threaten our physical health or well-being, or that we just perceive as scary, we're going to react the same way. And what happens is that part of your brain, because it's so fast, turns on everything inside of you to fix this problem. Because if you don't, something bad will happen. So when we're flooded with all of the cortisol and the adrenaline, and we feel anxious, the feeling is what triggers the thoughts. We like to say, oh, this triggered me, but it's actually what you thought about what happened. It's not necessarily, so two different people could look at the same thing and have totally different reactions. So we know it's not exactly the trigger, right? Like I could hold up this coffee cup and somebody could look at this and be completely triggered by it for whatever they thought. Whereas for me, I'm like, it just has coffee and it's fine. But if something about that cup, which is nothing, makes you feel a certain way, then you will start creating all of the thoughts in the world to figure out what you have to do to solve that problem if there's no danger at all.
Right.
So I don't even know if I answered your question right then. So what did I miss there?
You did. You didn't miss anything.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
You covered it really well, because I think we live in such an instant gratification society right now that we want a right now, this instant fix for everything. So you mentioned when you are feeling anxious and you reach out to other people, like you have to feel like you have to call someone and talk it out or whatever. For most people, they would think that's a very soothing answer, a solution to the problem. So why isn't it always?
It is soothing. And that's why we do it, right? We do it because well, if I could just talk to this person, I know I would calm down and I would feel better. But what happens is every time that we create a response to the feeling inside of us. So when I feel anxious, and everyone feels anxious differently, and we can talk about that if you want to. But when you know what the feeling is inside of you and you're like, I'm anxious, and if your solution is, I need to call. So for me, when I was struggling with health anxiety, I would call my mom or my dad, and I would always call them because my mom would say, Megan, I love you. And if I thought there was something wrong with you, I would be worried. So I was like, okay, well, my mom loves me. If she's not worried, then I don't need to worry. Or my dad would say, Megan, you're being ridiculous. Really, really. You're fine. And I'm not worried. So you're just being kind of crazy right now. And I'd be like, okay, well, my dad just thinks I'm crazy. So that's so much better than dying. So, right. Like, okay, I'd rather be crazy than dead. So yes. I would do that on repeat. And it got to the point, honestly, like when my anxiety was really high, that I would be calling them over and over and over again, because when I would get that quick breath of relief, it was like, oh, it's better. But then I would have to go back to that to feel better again. It's kind of like if you're going to quit smoking and you're like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm going to quit now. And then as soon as you get stressed out, you go for another cigarette. It's just that, like, you're just getting that quick ping of relief so that you start to depend on it. When in actuality, there's nothing wrong. You just have a lot of adrenaline and cortisol inside your body that feels really uncomfortable, but there's literally nothing to fix. So you're just looking for that little quick relief. Yeah. But it always comes back until you learn that this feeling feels horrible and I don't really enjoy this at all, but it's going to go away and I don't have to respond. And when you get to that point where you're like, I know my feeling, I know what it's saying to me, then you can start backing off and say, no, I'm not going to call. I'm just going to sit in this for a minute. and
Yeah.
use some other coping mechanisms, whether it's grounding or really getting familiar. I do a really fun activity with my clients about like they can picture their anxiety, they can actually draw a picture of it, they can talk to the picture, and just start saying, okay, what does this actually want? And the power of coaching and asking the right questions and saying, what is the feeling? Tell me more about the feeling. Tell me what pictures come up when you think about the feeling. What's actually going on? What are you really afraid of? What are you
Right.
really afraid is going to happen? And
Right.
not having to respond other than, oh, I'm not actually anxious, I'm sad.
Right.
Or I'm not actually anxious, I'm lonely. Or I'm embarrassed. Or
Hmm.
I'm thinking that I'm not enough, because anxiety is just such an umbrella term for so many negative emotions other than just fear, that a
Yeah.
lot of times we just lump everything in there to, this feels bad. I feel guilty. And we say, oh, that feels bad. I must be anxious.
Right. I totally agree with you.
Mhm.
And I'm really big on word association. For me, like if I can associate a concept with something that I'm familiar with, I can hold on to that. And as you were talking about calling your parents about your health anxiety and just calling them, and like I can just picture you, like
Mhm.
some days they're like, it's the evening and 15 calls in, they're like, oh my God, just you're
My
fine.
God. And
But it reminds
it was
me.
really like that. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But I have a
Yeah.
nursing background. So as you were talking about it, I had like this click in my brain. It was like an aha moment where
Mm.
I can associate it to something like becoming dependent on a medication, building up a resistance to that
Mhm.
medication. So that when you
Mhm.
first start out, you might need, say, I'm going to use pain medications because a lot of people take that stuff. Holy crap.
Mhm.
But
Mhm. Mhm.
that's a whole nother soapbox issue I won't get on. I'm just going to use it as an example for this
For sure.
for this illustration. So you may start out taking 2.5 milligrams of oxycodone, and you might take that for a few days or a week or a couple weeks even, and then pretty soon you need 5 milligrams for the same amount
Mhm.
of pain. The pain hasn't changed,
Mhm.
just your need for more of the medication has changed.
Mhm.
And then over time, you may have to take 7.5 and then 10 and then 15, and you build up, not because the pain is different, but because you have
Mhm.
used that solution so much that it requires more of it to accomplish the same thing that 2.5 did for you in the
Mhm.
beginning. So that helps
Mhm.
me to understand it in a way that, yeah, that I can really hold on to. So that's so interesting. So thank you
Mhm.
for sharing
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because, with all of the compassion and grace, if we can look at anxiety as we're doing our best because
Mm,
our brain is telling us we're about to die.
right.
And I mean, we do. I mean, it's mortal fear, right?
Mhm.
It's just mortal fear kicking in. And we're doing the very best that we can to survive. And whether that is, oh my gosh, I have to, for people who, even obsessive compulsive disorder, where they think I have to do this thing on repeat to be
Mhm.
safe, it's still that mortal fear. And it's that, okay, I've learned this process that makes me feel better, and it's not dangerous for us to call someone to ask for reassurance, but it's
Right.
also not helping us feel better. And it's not making our anxiety go away. It's just making it happen more often and
Mhm.
be more intense. And then we don't have anything else to do it. But when we learn to trust ourselves, and when we learn to say, oh God, like this is I know is for me, I know that I'm going to start to feel anxious when it feels like hot right in the middle of my chest, and my forearms down to my hands start to tingle. Like if
Mm,
you know the very first sign that your body's like, heads up, this is coming, then you can say, okay, well, then I better exhale now. And you can actually stop it before it ever even gets out of hand when you're paying attention. And then it's not a problem anymore. It's like, just give me a minute. I'm just going to go get this. And then you move on with your day instead of spinning and spinning and spinning in whatever your brain likes to offer up. Because basically, once you're in that mode of that fight or flight and everything's redirected, you're in it. And it's like, well, now I can't believe anything I think until I feel better, because everything I think is going to be crazy.
right.
It's just going to be reactionary and very protective,
Mhm.
but not necessarily true. And just for some people, I think just knowing that you think most of the thoughts that you think are negative, And most of the thoughts that you think are habitual and not true.
Right.
It's like 60,000 thoughts a day, and 99% of them or 98% of them are garbage lies. And I'm like, well, why am I wasting so much time with garbage lies? But we don't remember those either. I mean, we just think random things all the time.
Right. But they still affect us though, don't you
Yeah.
think? Even though they're kind of
Oh, for
sneaking
sure.
around in our
They're
brain and
scary.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's crazy
And
because I know I recently had an experience where I wasn't sleeping well for a while and I didn't necessarily feel like anything was wrong. You know what I mean? And then I was
mhm,
getting bloated and I'm like, I feel like I've gained 10 pounds and but
mhm,
I haven't been eating as much. So I'm like, what is going on? And then one
mhm,
day I sat down and like I really thought about what is happening in my body? What is my body trying to tell me right now? And I realized that
mhm,
I was having some anxiety about some things. And that's the day I actually sat down and wrote my send love post that I put on my Facebook page because I thought, this has been
mhm,
bothering me. This has been bothering me. I just really went down and listened. Okay, what can I do? I can't control out what other people do or how other people are, living their life or whatever. So I thought,
mhm,
if you're upset about this, just send love. If this is bothering you, send love. If you feel sad about something because somebody hurt your feelings or whatever, just send love to that person because, you know, we don't do that as much. And our negative
no.
emotion isn't going to hurt anybody but ourselves because most of the time the other people don't
Mhm,
even know what's going on in here, right? Because
mhm,
we're not telling them.
mhm,
We're not calling everybody up most of the time and saying, you hurt my feelings, or the fact that you didn't reply to me when I asked you a question just,
mhm,
really bothered me, or whatever the case may be. We're not sharing that all the time. So just sending love in that situation because you can't control their actions, it really did make me feel a lot better. Like I felt like my
mhm,
whole body just went I just relaxed. It was so
mhm.
amazing. So it
And you
it
brought that up, and
manifests
that
in
just
different ways.
for sure it does. And you just got me thinking, I wonder what would happen. Like, what if we actually did and say, hey, you said something that kind of hurt my feelings. What would happen if we actually said that to people and just dealt with it right up
Right.
front? Be like, hey, I might have taken this the wrong way. I perceived this like, maybe we wouldn't be so angry. Maybe
Hmm.
we wouldn't be so reactionary. Maybe we wouldn't be like screaming at each other on social media posts. What if we just handled it like, oh, I don't know. I thought this. And when I thought it, it made me feel this way. And I also think that that's a really important thing for people to know, that whatever is happening in your life, it doesn't even matter if it is something terrible. It's always like, if we can just look at what's happening around us as absolutely neutral,
Hmm.
always neutral. And then we get to understand that it's what we think about that what's happening that makes us have all of these emotions. And for so many people, I think that we get trapped in the way that we feel because we just keep telling ourselves rotten stories like, I'm stupid. Everybody hates me. The world's a dumpster fire. I'm a hot mess. You
Right.
know, the things that we just casually throw around like everybody sucks. Like, we say these things so often that our
Mm,
brain's like, yes. And we create so much more negativity. And if we could just address it and say,
yes.
oh, I don't know, I just had this thought that like you were mad. And then I started getting worked up and I thought maybe we should just talk about it. And wow, we could really take care of some business
We could.
if everybody could just adopt that and
Yeah.
pay attention to what you're thinking. And is it actually a true thought? Like, you could prove it? Or is it just something that you have a strong opinion about?
Mm,
Because that will also make you feel anxious. And you can lower your stress level by just changing what you say to yourself on a regular basis.
absolutely. Absolutely. Inner dialogue
Mm-hmm.
is huge, and
Mm-hmm.
it is in every situation. It doesn't,
Uh-huh.
like, you teach around stress and anxiety, I teach around self-love and mindset, and that inner
Mm-hmm.
dialogue has
Oh,
across the
yeah.
board, it's so powerful. So how can we get stronger in our inner dialogue so that we're not following these catastrophic storylines that we like to follow?
Mm-hmm. And we're surrounded by them, aren't we? I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know. Like, it was funny. I spent 10 days in Germany this summer, and they're catastrophic. Well, maybe they were in German and I didn't know what they were saying, but it didn't feel as heavy there, is what I'm
Right.
saying. It was like, oh. no, it feels pretty good here. Like not everybody is falling apart all the time. So, um, but yeah, if we could just be so much kinder to ourselves, I guess, if you wouldn't say it to your daughter, if you wouldn't say it to your niece or your grandmother or your son or your dad or someone else, then please don't say it to yourself either.
Right.
And just catch yourself, really just be mindful of, why would I tell myself that? Like, why would I want to believe that? Because you really don't have to believe it.
Yeah.
We just do. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of it. We don't have to believe it. We get the choice,
No.
but it seems so easy. And I remember an illustration on Facebook a long time ago where a teacher in a class went to the board and they wrote out 10 math problems. And she
Mm-hmm.
purposely made one of them incorrect. The answer was incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And then the students in the class were talking about the math problems, and the only one they were talking about was the one that was
Mm-hmm.
incorrect. And it's the same thing with
Yeah.
us. We could get 10 compliments in a row, and then some jerk comes along and tells us one negative thing about ourselves. And we immediately dismiss all of those 10 beautiful compliments and believe that one
Mm-hmm.
insult.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can we
Yeah.
do? And I know that's a lot of stressor with a lot of people is just other
Yeah.
people's opinions. So how do we deal with that? What can we do to help with that?
Well, the first thing that I think is like the most practical thing is like if those kind of things really hit hard for you. I mean, some people I feel like, especially if you're highly sensitive and you really like, if you're a crier like me, if you're highly sensitive, but if that's something where the other people, like I've gotten better at it, but if you're really bothered by that, well, turn off the comments on your social media posts and
Mm,
turn off your notifications because you don't have to be bombarded with that. And certainly never read the comments on anyone else's post because you're just going to get fired up over nothing. Like there are trolls are trolls are trolls, and they're going to come out there
mm,
because they only leave negative reviews. They only have crappy things to say. I made a post once about, I think I was talking about perspective. I was talking about perspective. And I was sitting outside Starbucks in my little teeny town. And it was funny because I looked across the street, and across the street, there was Jimmy John's. And there were these two guys, and they were both standing there. And my first thought was, ooh, they look mad. They're going to get in a fight. And then I watched for 10 seconds and I'm like, oh, no, no, no. They're just talking. But I did this quick post on, I just want to share with you about perspective. I'm sitting here at Starbucks, and my first thought was, the guys across the street they're going to fight. Like, this is going to be bad. And then I was like, but it was fine. And I just wanted to tell you that perspective is everything. And I looked at that and immediately saw that, but I could change my perspective. And when I gave myself a second, I could just notice that it wasn't that. And then someone just commented, this woman has no life. And my reply was, on that day, I didn't. I mean, what? I'm like, oh, okay. And a lot of times, just learning to like something. And I was like, thanks. Yeah, I really didn't have much going on that day. I mean, here I am sitting outside Starbucks thinking this is going to be bad. So, but if those kinds of things, if those kinds of negative comments, or your hair looks crazy, or, yeah, whatever somebody says to somebody else that really like hits them in the feels and makes them feel awful about themselves, every time somebody, some things you can do is like when somebody makes you feel badly about yourself, okay, challenge that with 3 things that you love about yourself.
mhm,
Like, oh, they said I was stupid, but you know what I know? I know these 3 things about myself that are actually true, that are really great.
mm,
Remembering that they had a 5-second snippet into your life, and you might have been having a moment where you actually were watching some drama across the street, or maybe they were having a bad day. And most of the time, when people make comments about ourselves, it's a reflection of what's going on inside of them. And it has absolutely nothing to do with us anyway. I mean, if somebody takes the time to post on your social media thing that you don't have a life, my guess is they don't either, because they just took time to comment on my post. I'm like, you having a
right.
rough day too? Yeah. I see that you're having the same kind of day. I mean, oh, yeah, like, and remembering that most of the time it is not directed at us, but it is just a direct reflection of what's going on inside of them. That can be really difficult in the moment because it does hurt, and we do have
Mm,
emotions when they say that.
yeah.
But when we have enough confidence and we have enough love for ourselves and enough clarity to be able to calm that rush that we get, that adrenaline rush or that hormone rush or whatever happens, and to say, okay, I can tell you're in a mood. I'm gonna let that one go. Most of the time we forget about it in 2 minutes.
Right. We really do.
Yeah.
Because it's not that, you know, I don't want to say it's not that important, but at the end of the day, one of the exercises that I learned in one of my coaching classes was like this thing, and it's a 3-part thing, and it's breathe, breathe, breathe. I can't remember the second one. And then the last one is, this isn't as important as I think it is. This isn't as, and you just repeat it. It's like a little mantra. You just repeat each thing 3 times. And
Oh, that's good.
and it really is so impactful, because like, especially if you put your hand over your heart, you know, I know that seems like a really cheesy thing to a lot of people, but you know, and Greg Braden teaches this for heart mind coherence, which is really a powerful thing, where your attention goes here when you place your hand here. And so it really is, I mean, if you did it without this, it may help, but if you do it with your hand over your heart, and it's just that act of that little bit of pressure in that area that really draws your attention there, and it makes an amazing difference. So yeah, most things aren't as important as we think they are. And in the grand scheme of things, you know, like Steve and I were talking one day, just case in point, about high school basketball. You know, we were kind of joking. I can't remember what we were watching. We were watching something, and I was like, oh, he's having an Al Bundy moment, you know, like where he takes that one moment in that high school football game, and it's just like this monumental moment. And that's his highlight for like the entire rest of his life. And he's in his 50s now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Peaked in high school. Yep.
but was it really that important of a moment? Yeah, it was a cool moment, but was it that important? And we put so much
the
importance
pinnacle of
on
your
these
life. Yeah.
tiny little moments, and you know, and hurt people. So I think that, you know, like you said, when we don't know what's going on in someone's life, I mean, they may have, their dog may have just died or something like that, or they may have had a fight right before, they may have broke up with their boyfriend. They're not going to dump that on you if they don't know you. They're just going to snap at you in the moment. And you know, and we don't have to choose to carry that with us forever. So
yeah, and that's so true. And I think that, and that the same goes true, like when you asked about like, how do we, like a few minutes ago when you said, you know, what do we do when we feel anxious, and how can we not call somebody for reassurance, or Google, or, you know, whatever it is that you think that you have to do. Like, I have to run and I have to grab a Xanax, or I have to, you know, I have to get out of here. Escaping is a big one. I can't be here. It makes me anxious. Like, what if you stayed? What if you just stayed and felt anxious? And I've actually worked through this a lot with my son, who just recently, like in the last week, like he's had some pretty big anxious moments happen. And just like, I was like, you need to just like sit in it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk. Like, I know that's not what you want to hear from your mom. I'm like, and I'll sit here on the phone with you. I'm like, but I can't reassure you. And like, I'm just going to sit here and be quiet, and you're going to sit there and be anxious, because this is going to end. Like, nobody is anxious forever. And what's really interesting, I think, at least in my own experience, has been that so often the things that we're anxious about, once it's over, you'll be like, I don't really know how I got that way. Like, I don't really believe that anymore. And there's always this very small part of us, even when we are incredibly anxious, that knows that I don't think this is true, but it feels really true inside of me. And we do know that our body holds on to memories. That's why, you know, you'll see people that tears hold memories. Like, we hang on to all of those memories in different places in our bodies. And, you know, if we can go there, we can say, okay, what do I actually need here so that I can let this go? But so often when your brain's just, my coach at one point said, yeah, brain's gonna brain. And I'm like, that quote should be on a shirt or something, like brain's gonna brain. Like, you're not gonna make them stop. That's their job.
Haters gonna hate, brains are gonna brain.
Yeah. And like, and my thing every time, like when I'm working with somebody, I'm like, you have to drive the bus. Like, if you do not drive your brain, it will go off the cliff, because that's what it does. That's his job. So you have to focus your brain where you want it to go. And there are times, of course, when we want to relax, we want to meditate, or we want to be creative. But even that is within the boundaries of I'm going to paint, or I'm going to sing, or I'm going to dance, or I'm going to do something creative. But if you're just going to sit on your couch and let your mind wander, get ready. Because if you're not driving it where you want it to go, and you tend to be anxious or feel anxious in that moment, it's going to go downhill really quickly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's so
yeah.
interesting that we do let it do that. And when you were talking about
Mm,
just, being focused on something and taking control of our brain, I was thinking it's, if we were watching a movie we didn't like, we wouldn't think
mhm.
twice about picking up the remote and changing it to a different channel or a different
This is stupid.
show.
I don't want to watch this. Yeah.
Right. We wouldn't think twice about it. But when those thoughts start playing in our brain, we'll just let them keep playing. We would never sit and watch a movie we hated. We'd never do that,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just thinking that we have that control and we can shift those thoughts and change that channel, so to speak, that's really powerful. And a
Hmm.
brain's gonna brain.
And we
And I,
can. And I
yeah,
know that that can feel really difficult, like when you're in the thick of it, because it's really hard to see our own thoughts, isn't it? I mean, to say, well, I think this and it feels very true. So how do I know? And really getting familiar with your own body and getting familiar with your own patterns and being
yeah,
able to say, okay, what if it's not true? What if it's not? Like, how long are you willing to wait to find out if it's actually true before you think that you're really going down? And
right.
but just understanding that, yeah, it's okay. It's safe for you to feel one way and then think your way out of it because you thought your way into it.
Right, right.
But I love
Absolutely.
that example of we would turn off a movie. Like, I don't want to watch this. This is a stupid movie. I don't want to watch this. And it's making
Right.
me anxious. I'm not going to watch it. Yeah.
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 And some days I know, and I haven't been a coach for a long, long time, but some days I know I get bogged down with stuff and I can't seem to access the tools. Like it's almost like having a
Mm.
hammer in your tool bag and needing to hammer in this nail,
Hmm.
but just not being able to get that hammer
Hmm.
out to do it. So,
Hmm.
how would you encourage someone who has learned some of these tools and has a
Hmm.
day, like I recognize it in myself because I've been doing the self work for a while, but,
Hmm.
so I'm not saying I have easy times on those days, thankfully they're few and
Hmm.
far between, but for a person
Right.
who
It's
hasn't
hard.
had
Yeah.
as much practice at it and they're having a day where they just can't get that tool into play, what would you tell them to do on those days to put
Yeah.
those thoughts to
That's a good
rest?
question. Yeah. So the first thing I always tell anyone, like if they like for my son when he called me, or if I have a client that texts me and said, I'm going up, like I need help right now. The first thing I'm like, you need to pause and you need to exhale for 2 minutes. And we don't ever talk about inhaling. Ever. Because everybody says, take a deep breath. And I'm like,
Right.
absolutely do not do that. Do
Okay.
not take a deep breath, please. And here's why. Most people who are anxious tend to be very shallow breathers and they breathe from about maybe down to here. And they really need to be breathing down to their belly button. But you can't fit any more air in when you're just going, they're
Right.
kind of like sitting still and running, if you can imagine that. Like it's very short, quick breaths. So what I'm always like, okay, pause, listen to me. We're going to exhale. And I'm like, you need to exhale as if somebody is like squishing you, like squishing all the air out of a balloon until you're squeezing it. Squeeze the air out until like your abs are pulled in. Everything is like, I can't exhale anymore. And I'm like, and then I want you to exhale more and more and more until you literally are like, I'm like, nothing's going to go wrong. Your body will not let you die from that, but you have
Right.
to push that air out. And then I want you to
Mm,
breathe in slowly through your nose and hold your breath for a second. And then you can exhale normally and then take a normal breath. And we're going to do that again. And I'm like, we do that for, 4 or 5 times, however long you need to do it. And that just flips the switch on your nervous system. But really, I'm like, pause, exhale. The first step is always
mm,
we have to exhale. And then once you get to the point where you can think rationally, it's really helpful just to get to know. Like I said, my first anxiety symptom is hot right here, and my fingers feel numb,
mm.
and which is a totally normal biological response. But if you didn't know that, you would think something's wrong. I'm something's really, really wrong. I feel like I have to fix this. And whether you focus on whatever the thought was that you were thinking, like, I upset my coworker, I'm going to get fired, I'm a failure, whatever that thought is, if you're focusing on that thought, or for other people like me that would focus more on how their body felt and you'd think I'm having a stroke or something's wrong or whatever your brain comes up with, if you can notice how your body feels in that moment and create this split-second pause, you can say, okay, wait, I know what's going on here. That's anxiety. That is how I feel when I'm anxious. It's like your own brand of anxiety. If you can say, ooh, okay, I've got this. Now I really need to focus on this breathing a little bit more. I need to practice that exhale. And I know at HCI, they teach the 5-5-7 breath.
Mhm.
And so in for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 7. But again, we're always going to the longer exhale and really
Right.
making sure that we're pushing that air out. 5-5-7 is great. I've found that for a lot of my clients who are so used to breathing really shallowly for a long time, we 3-3-5 because they're like, I'm dizzy. This is getting worse. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, no, wait, let's go to 3-3-5. That's too much oxygen for you.
Right.
So depending on where they are and just really being able to play with that. So I think it's helpful not to use those numbers for me, but just to say you need to really squish that air out until you
Mhm.
can't, and then let them find their own numbers with that. But getting to know how your body feels and just saying, sometimes I feel this way. And when I do, I know I need to exhale and I need to not believe anything that's going on up here until I'm calm. And then I can say, okay, what is actually true? I know my brain is saying all of this nonsense, it's making up stories, but what's actually true? And what's actually true is I'm anxious for whatever reason.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm to the point now where I actually have to stretch my brain to think, what happened that actually made me anxious? And it's always
Mhm.
some old trigger that comes back, and I'll be like,
Yes.
oh, there was like this one quick post on Instagram that triggered me, or there was a 10-second thing I saw on TV that it didn't even register when I saw it. But then later on, they're like, oh, remember, you're supposed to freak out about this.
Right.
Yeah. And then, being able to go through that.
Yeah. It's so true too, because I find, and I'm going to use this just as an example. I was in every relationship I was ever in until my current one was a very toxic, controlling,
Oh,
abusive environment. And
mm-hmm,
now I'm in this amazing relationship with this incredible man. And sometimes still, I'm in a healthy relationship. I call him my first 100% safe space that I've ever had in my entire life,
oh,
because it's just
yeah,
spiritual safety, emotional safety, physical safety.
amazing.
It's all there and it's so beautiful. But we've been living together for almost 3 years and it still gets weird for me because I've never had this before. So there's still aspects, still things that
Mm-hmm,
come up, and I have to take a look at them like you did, like you said, and think, where did that come from? It wasn't something he did. It wasn't something he
mm-hmm,
said. It was nothing. It was just this thing from years ago that came back and was like, remember when I was your life, and whispering in my ear, and I'm like, have to shut it up. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it isn't always
mm-hmm,
something that's from today that we're experiencing now. It can
mm-mm,
just be that reminder of something from way back when. And
mm-hmm.
so what's a good way for people to recognize that it's not something from today, that it's something from way back? And how is that handled in a different way? Or are we still handling it in the same way?
So there's a difference between fear and anxiety, right? Like fear is very immediate danger. You could be like, if somebody dropped an alligator in my lap right now, I'm going to be fearful that it's going to bite my face or something, right? Like that would be scary, and I would push it away. And then once it was away, I would be fine. It would be over. So fear goes away quickly. The funny
Mhm.
thing about triggers or anxiety things, like I hate that word by the way, but I just keep saying it, trigger, is that it can be something as simple as a change in the light.
Mhm.
Like your body, your nervous system is so in tune to protective, like to be protective of you, that even if it's like, oh, it was just the way someone's head turned, or it was a quick whiff of a smell that you had smelled before, and maybe it's not even something that you associated, or it could even be like a combination of a smell and a light that your brain was like, I've seen that. and it just
Right.
reacts like so fast. And unfortunately, that protective side, that amygdala and that hippocampus are the fastest part of our brains. And because they're so fast, by the time you notice it, you're playing catch up. So just,
Hmm.
I don't know that it even matters if it is a current trigger or something in the past, because once you're triggered, you're there and you react the same. Your response needs to be the same. It's like, oh, okay, this feeling I know, this is a trigger, and it may have come from something in the past. It may have been, this reminded me of my dog, or this reminded me of this horrible relationship I was in, or anything else. And right now, that's not where I am. So the
Hmm.
triggers can come from anywhere. I mean, and they can, and we say triggers, and sometimes I want to say, the reason I think I don't like the word trigger is, one, I don't feel like people should have to hopscotch around triggers for the rest of their life. I don't think it's necessary,
Right.
even for people who are chronically anxious. You don't want to live your life like that. And certainly no one else is responsible for your triggers but you. And to be able to say, oh, yeah, sometimes I just feel this way because my body remembers something, because it also happens for good things.
Hmm.
Have you ever just smelled something and you're like, oh, God, I love that smell? This is
Yeah.
so weird. But my family, we went to the same vacation place for like 40 years. And we went with my grandparents and my cousins, and they cleaned the downstairs bathrooms and the lobby of this condominium building with this orange cleaner. And so every time my brothers and I smell this, we're like, it smells like the bathrooms in Florida. Like, we love it. And I'm like, it's orange cleaner. And I'm like, I love that smell. And it's so dumb, but it brings back that memory of like hanging out with my grandparents and my cousins and being at the beach. And so triggers aren't all bad, but
Mhm.
definitely it's just those memories are all throughout you, and we handle them the same way no matter what.
Yeah. So I have a question because I'm the type of person, and I've really been diligently working on this because I recognize it in myself, because I'm a very logically minded person. So if I can
Hmm.
understand something, why it's happening, where it
Hmm.
came from, and all that, I tend to be able
Oh yeah.
to deal with it a lot better. But you don't always. Like you said, it may be a turn of a head
Hmm.
in the lighting or whatever. And then all of a
Hmm.
sudden you're feeling that way. But if you don't understand what it was that made you feel that way, and
Hmm.
you're like me and you deal with things better when you do understand them, what would you say to someone in a situation like that?
Mm. You want me to tell you what I would tell you? I would say, why
Yes.
does it matter? Yeah, why does it matter that you know where it came from? What
Yeah.
if it only matters how you handle it?
Right.
Because they can come from anywhere, right? Like, do we really, really need to know where it came from, or do we just need to know what it is so we know what the next step is?
Yeah, that's a powerful point. It really is.
Yeah, and it's not that I'm discounting that people have like things that happened in the past that were a big deal. Like, I definitely think there are certain things in the past that we need to work through, that, I mean, especially people who have PTSD or anything like that. But for the general population of people who get very anxious, like obviously there was something that made me anxious, but I don't think it was anything other than probably my parents being like maybe too cautious with me. Like, I don't think it was anything like
Yeah.
earth shattering. So sometimes when we just keep going back to the why, we're just reinforcing that there's a problem, when we can say, oh, instead of, let's just talk about what happened in the past again and again and again and again and again. Every time we do that, we're just bringing it to the surface. Instead, we can say, a lot of really crappy things happened in the past, and I still react to those things sometimes, but I'm headed this way. Like, I'm going
Right.
over here. So I'm going to say, oh, sometimes I feel this way. Something happened, but I'm moving this way now. So I just
Yeah.
need to know what's next.
Right.
And that's really, I think, probably the best. When anybody says, oh, you're a therapist, I'm like, no, I'm not a therapist, like, at all. Like, I'm a teacher and I'm a coach.
Right.
And I'm like, so therapists are fantastic. Like, definitely there are people that need to go to therapy to heal a lot of past trauma. And coaching goes, therapy covers the past and coaching covers the future. And for me as a coach, just being able to say, yeah, like, I hope that you are getting the support that you need, and let's move this direction.
Yes.
And I've had a lot of incredible results with people that said, I went to therapy for years and we just kept talking about it and it just kept happening. And I'm like, yeah, well, are you done?
Right.
Like, are you done with that? Because if you want to be done with it, we can just be done. And then we can go that way and start healing and
Yeah.
creating some new paths.
I'm so glad you said that because I think that's such a powerful thing for people to realize. I've been using that word so many times in my last interviews,
We
it
all
seems like,
do. I mean,
but
we all do. Yeah.
man, it's so impactful to realize that you don't have to live in that space. And there's a huge difference in reliving the past and reviewing
Mm-hmm.
the past for
Yes.
educational
Yeah.
purposes. Like that situation happened, and in that situation, I did this, but now I'm going that way. So I'm going to handle it in this way. It doesn't have to remain the same. So I feel like that's very important for people to understand. And I'm so glad you said everything you just said because I know that someone out there needed to hear that because it's so
Yeah.
impactful. It really is. We
Yeah.
just get bogged down and we don't know where to go
We
sometimes.
do.
And what we need to realize
Yeah.
is back there in the past, that's not where we're going anymore. There's nothing we can do about that. And it's all
Mm-hmm.
about what we're creating now. So letting go of the stress and do you find that people a lot of times people stress is related to the past, or do you feel like it's probably just a combination, I would imagine. Yes.
It really depends what they're thinking about. So, for example, if you had somebody that was stressed about work, I get a lot of people who are like stressing about work, and it's either like, I did this in the past, I wish I could fix it
Mhm.
because I think everybody was laughing at me. I think I screwed up. I think, this. So now I'm worried that tomorrow I'm going to go to work and my boss is going to fire me, or everybody's going to laugh at me when I walk in, or they're going to think I can never do anything wrong. It can be back and forth as well. And what's really weird about where we are, like in the whole space-time continuum, is that you can time travel at any given moment because your brain just assumes whatever you're thinking about is happening right now.
Yes.
That's how you can go in the shower. I mean, you can go take a shower and you can think about the saddest thing ever in the future or in the past and end up snot crying in the shower, but you're just taking a shower. Your
Right.
brain thinks it's happening because you pulled it up.
Right.
Another thing that I learned, that I don't know why I never heard this before, but your brain never remembers the same way twice,
Oh,
ever.
yeah.
And you just don't even know it. Like, it's changes and you just assume it's the truth because you thought it, but it changes just so like infinitesimally that you're like, oh, that's how it happened. But the more we think about it, the worse we can make it,
Yeah.
because we're like, well, that's not actually what happened at all. But we just keep pulling it up and pulling it up and pulling it up. And sometimes the more we pull it up, if we're not directing it in the right path, it just explodes on us.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just have to be really careful. Again, you have to drive that bus and you have to make your brain go where you want it to go.
Absolutely. Have you heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Yes.
He
I'm doing the Walk
actually
for the World on Saturday. Are you doing it?
uh I don't even know about it. So
Okay, it's a big like Walk for the World thing. You should look it up, but it happens this Saturday.
okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
But he talks about
Yeah.
that. He talks about how the memories that we have of the past, like, are 70% bull crap, basically. Like we create this whole story that we, like you said, it just changes a little bit. He doesn't put it quite that way. But yeah, so a lot of the stuff that we
Mm-hmm.
think is so horrid in the past, we don't even remember actually how it really did happen anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just like this
Mm-hmm.
fiction writing that we do and to keep ourselves
Yeah, isn't
like,
it crazy?
and why do you think people are so committed? And that's how I put it. People are so committed to their misery, but if they would spend half as much of that energy being committed to moving forward and taking a different direction, they would be, oh my gosh, the things they could accomplish are just insane to think about. So why do you think that is?
Hmm. Partly because I think it's easy. Not
Mm,
that it feels good or that we enjoy it, but it doesn't take much effort to stay in your story. I mean, to get out of your story because your brain thinks on habit and because it'll just think the same thing over and over and over and over again. But because your brain thinks on habit, if that's where you've been your whole life and people have told you that for your whole life, let's say that your parents told you were no good, and then your teacher told you were no good, and you just adopted the thought I'm no good, then you're just going to find everything to keep backing that up. It's going to be the self-fulfilling prophecy. So if it's easier to stay there
Mm,
as opposed to saying, no, I'm done with that, I'm going to find new ways, because it takes attention and it takes time, and
yes.
people want it. And it's like they try it for a day and they're like, well, that didn't work at all. So they
Right.
give up. And I'm like,
Yes.
wow, but you just spent like 30 years telling yourself this other thing you thought was going to happen in one day.
Right.
Um, yeah. And really, though, the funny thing is that it takes like, what, a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, okay, so a month and a half or 2 months versus 30 years, that's not a bad ratio. Like if you can
Right.
stick with it for a minute, yeah, it's kind of like learning to go to the gym.
Yeah, it is.
Our
I use
brains are
that
always going to
analogy
take
a
the easy
lot,
way out.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah. You will take the easy way out. You will conserve energy, and your brain has a negativity bias because it's trying to keep you safe. And if it's kept you safe and miserable, it's better than safe, or it's better than unsafe. So you'll just keep thinking the same things until you prove yourself wrong and change your story. Yeah. I really think it's because it's easy.
Yeah,
Isn't it
that's
sad that we choose
it
easy and
is.
miserable?
It is. It's
Ew.
so sad.
I would say that. Yeah.
We so much potential inside of ourselves. It's just uncanny. And I've
Hmm.
said before, like we'll dull ourselves down. We'll make ourselves less that fast, but we
Hmm.
won't make ourselves more. And
Mm-mm.
it's mind-boggling sometimes to me that,
Hmm.
and I am that person that made myself less for a lot of years. I mean, I really did. I didn't believe in myself. I put myself in
Hmm.
bad situations, and then I stayed in those situations while they progressively
Hmm.
got worse. And it,
Yeah.
it took a lot of effort and intention to bring myself out of that space. And, I was just actually thinking not too long ago about the reality of feeling like even after I took a shower, right, and got out of the shower, how exhausted I was because I didn't feel like I
Mm-hmm.
deserved the 5 minutes after
Hmm.
my shower to put on my lotions and brush my
Hmm.
hair. It was
Hmm.
exhausting to me. And I thought, why do I feel
Yeah.
so exhausted by this? And it felt like I literally didn't deserve that amount of time to just do that simple thing. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think you don't deserve it, all the other things that you're saying to yourself, I'm not, obviously I don't deserve it, but whatever else it is, that running dialogue that's in your head, it's terrible, but you're not dead yet. I mean, that's always kind of your brain goes back to, yeah, well, you're not dead yet, so you can just stay miserable.
Right,
And, when you do think about breaking out of that pattern, there's always like, what if I can't do it?
right.
What if everybody thinks I'm crazy? What if it doesn't work? What if this? And, it's easier to stay there because that
Yep,
fear of failure, and I have to do it perfectly the first time. And, nobody's going to believe that. Nobody could believe that I could be a coach. I mean, how can I
right.
coach somebody with anxiety if I had health anxiety for that long? Or it's like, oh, like there's that level of imposter syndrome in there too. And
Yes.
that's all meant just to keep you right where you are.
Yeah.
But we don't
And the
have
bottom
to. And
line
I think
is,
there's a lot to go with that.
in my experience, there are those people that are going to think that. There are those people that are going to even say those
Oh,
things
for
to
sure.
you,
Yeah.
but you have to
Yeah.
believe in yourself enough to keep going through that, to keep,
Yeah.
even though that's there to keep pushing and knowing that you can be something different and
Hmm.
do something different than what you're doing now.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is a great conversation because there's so many, I mean, like stress
Yeah.
is so prevalent. It just, and it seems so big to people. It just seems
Yeah.
so big. Like one of the things, I don't know, do you tell your clients to just shut off the news? Do you ever tell them that? Stop watching the news.
Yes. My existential threat people, I'm like, why are you watching it though? Like, if it's stressing you out, it's like every time I get on Instagram, I just want to cry and I feel terrible about myself. I'm like, you need to just delete the app. well, I couldn't do that. I'm like, well, why not? I'm like, well, what if I miss something? I'm like, well, it's making you miserable. What if you do? That would be fantastic.
Right.
Yeah, but it is like, just turn off the news. Turn off
Yeah.
the news, turn off your notifications, and focus on like really just building that gratitude of
Mm.
like, you know what? I woke up in a bed. That is
Yes.
so much more than so many people in the world wake up. I have students who don't wake up in a bed, they sleep on the
Yes.
floor. So I'm like, I got a bed, man. I got a dog and she's annoying, but she's sweet. Like it's
Right.
just those little tiny things. Like if you have water that comes on in your kitchen, you're killing it in this life. And
Right.
we breeze right over those things. And if you can just start so small,
Hmm.
um, I had a friend who, gosh, several years ago, we were talking about the power of gratitude, and she keeps one of those little teeny, like the mini spiral notebooks. She keeps it next to her coffee canister. And every morning while her coffee's brewing, she writes down 3 things that she's grateful for. She's like, I have time. I'm not going anywhere until that coffee's done.
Yeah.
So I write down 3 things every morning, but just creating that habit of saying, I will force my brain to go there, especially if you're like the world is on fire and everything's bad. I'm like, well, you need to start finding the things that aren't, because there's a lot out there that'll scare you to death, but there's a lot of good going on too.
Oh, there's so
But you
much
got to
good.
dig
So
for
much
it.
good.
Yeah.
And I say that very often too, because we're so focused. The negative is so much louder. This is how I look at it. The
Mm-hmm.
negative is so much louder. It's not that the positive doesn't exist, because it does.
Mm-hmm.
And it exists just as bountifully as the negative does.
Mm-hmm.
But the negative
Yeah.
is so much louder and it's so dramatic. And we're such a over, what's the word, stimulated society, that someone posting a video of a morning sunrise with the birds in the background, as I've been known to do, you know,
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to have
Me
the
too.
impact of some kind of dramatic interaction between somebody in the Walmart parking lot. Mine may
Yeah.
get 5 views and that one's going to get 50,000 views or more, because
Right.
we're so overstimulated that we can't stop and calm down and relax enough to enjoy something that's just pretty,
Mm.
that's peaceful,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. There's nothing better than sitting outside in the morning when the birds are chirping and I'm like, it is sunny. I have coffee. The birds are chirping. It's good. And I think that one of the things that just came to mind was that I have this movie. It's like, I think it's a Christmas movie actually, but it's like the Nativity movie, right? Like it's a live action Nativity, Mary Joseph and all this. And maybe it was Easter, one of the two. But one of the things was it was like a reenactment of this conversation. And there was this like older woman, like this matriarch of the village or whatever, and there's all these little children listening to her story, and her thing was you listen to the still small voice. And I think that's so important, that if you can just get down to that still small voice, like whether whether it's intuition, whether it's the Holy Spirit, whether it's whatever that is, that just like that whisper of goodness that is there, that's going to get you to the next step. But you have to turn off the noise, and
Yeah.
turning off things like the news, and turning off things that are pulling, the fights that kids are posting. I'm like, stop posting that crap, because it's
Right.
so like it's just filling your brain with noise. I'm like, you got to find like that whisper, just that still small voice of peace. And it is everywhere when you look for it. But man, you won't see it unless you're looking.
Yeah.
It's too
Yeah.
hard. Like there's so much noise. Yeah.
There's so much noise. You have to make a diligent effort. We moved to the country in April, and we have like 2 acres out here in the country. And I'll go outside in the morning and I hear roosters crowing and cows mooing, and
Yeah.
the people's hunting dogs way, like they're probably a mile away on the
Uh-huh.
other block, but you can hear them. It's all these country sounds and the crickets and the birds and all this stuff, and it's just, to me, it's music. I walk out there and I'm like, God,
It
I
is
love
so
this.
good.
It's, it
Yeah.
just immediately just calms you down. And I love to go outside barefooted and just connect with the earth, with my bare feet. And
Hmm.
it's just so
Yes.
amazing. So I just like to, remind people to just take time to notice these small, beautiful things, because I think it's so,
Yes.
so important. yeah, there's negativity.
Mhm.
Just because you appreciate beauty doesn't mean you don't know that that negativity is there. It's
Mhm.
not like keeping your head in the sand. I don't believe in toxic
Mhm.
positivity or toxic gratitude or any of those ridiculous
Nope,
terms.
none of that works.
None of that
I don't
is,
even know how I feel about affirmations because I'm like, those don't work unless you believe them.
yeah,
Like you
right.
can say I am wonderful and beautiful and the perfect person a million times, but if you don't believe it, hey, you're wasting your time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And it's really awkward to say those things to yourself in the beginning. I know I had a
Oh
hard
yeah.
time with it. Holy crap.
Oh yeah. I'm
Phew.
like, does anybody see me? No one hears me, right? Like that's how you know they're not true, right? If you're saying it and you're like, that's they should, I hope they don't hear that. That's how you know it's not true, I think, too, where you're like, no, like I really am beautiful. Like if you said
Yeah.
that to somebody and you were like, yeah, it was good, but you're like, I'm beautiful.
Yes.
You don't believe it. Keep trying.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people believe that you're being narcissistic if you love
Yeah.
yourself, and it is not the same. It's not the same.
No.
And
No.
I
Narcissism is like an actual mental disorder. Yeah.
yeah, I actually had a client that we were talking about the self-love piece, and she was, felt like, but I'll be a narcissist if I love myself. And I'm like, she's a very logically minded person too, very analytical brain. And I said, I want you to do me a
Mhm,
favor.
mhm.
I want you, after we have our session today, I want you to go get a dictionary and I want you to look up the definition of narcissism. And there was another one I gave her too. I
Mhm.
can't remember what it was. And I said, I want you to read it. And then next time we talk, I want you to tell me, do you think that that could possibly be true about you? Do you think you would ever be the person that that definition
Yeah.
would fit? You know, because I mean, there are narcissists out there. I've, lived with
Oh, for
3 of
sure.
them.
They're in the
Holy crap.
DSM-5, right? But
Yeah.
we well, and we are so big to toss terms around too, like, "Oh, they're such a narcissist," or, "Oh, I'm such a," like, we throw these terms around and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, whoa, whoa." Just
Yeah.
because somebody did something selfish doesn't make them a narcissist. They could be an
Right.
incredibly selfish person and still not be a narcissist.
That's right.
Um, but we just toss those terms around and I'm like, let's save that for the real jerks or the people
Yeah.
who are, that what's going on here or who really are, you could be a narcissist and I mean, it's a thing, right? Like it's yeah, kind of like the people who get that are always think that they're panicking, and I'm like, you're not panicking, you're just stressed out. Like it's not the same thing, It's yeah,
Yeah.
but we do like we just are so over maybe just inundated with all of the terminology, and we just
Mm.
you know
Oh,
how sometimes things get to be buzzwords too. Like we're
yes.
just like we have the buzzword thing. Yeah.
And we humans love labels, and I don't really
Oh
like
yeah, we do.
labels because
I don't either.
this is the way I look at it. If I say that I am something to you, like for instance, I say I'm not religious, but I was raised Pentecostal. But if I said to you, Megan, I'm Pentecostal, immediately, without me saying anything else to you and without you knowing anything else about me, this whole list of things is going to come up under that label that I just gave you for myself.
For
And
sure.
some of them or
Yeah.
none of them may be true about me, but you're going to
Right.
think those things about me automatically because that label was stuck to my forehead, So that's one of the
Yeah, and we
reasons I
do
don't
it
like
with so many things.
it. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
we do it with
do.
everything. And we can't even like I mean, there's so I mean, we're just to a point where it's like everything has an association with it now too, where I'm like, gosh, you can't even like shop at a certain store, but like it's just rampant. And to be able to just get away from that, again, just run away, turn off the TV, do something else, even if it's just like I did 5 minutes less than I did the day before.
Mhm.
I'm not saying be uninformed and live in a hole by any means. I want you to know what's going on in the world. I think that's really important. I taught social studies and history for crying out loud. Please know, please vote, please do all the things, but
Yes,
don't make it your life and your entire personality. Like yes,
right. Absolutely. I
yeah,
100% agree with you. That was very well said. Very,
thank you.
very welcome. Do you have any more tips about stress and anxiety for us today? Anything that you
Oh,
have on your heart to share with
it's
us?
such a rabbit hole. I mean, I could go on for like months. So, yeah, is there anything I missed that you want me to speak on?
You did a really great job of covering it. I feel I don't
Thank
have any other
you.
questions right at the moment.
Great. Well, I
Okay.
hope it was helpful for your
Yeah,
listeners and for you too. So thank you for having
absolutely.
me.
Yeah, you gave some great
Yeah,
tips. So before I close
thank
this out, I
you.
would like for you to tell everyone
Mhm.
where they can find you if they would like to have you
Sure.
as a coach, and then tell us also what your podcast is called, because I know you have your own podcast. So we'll
I
put that
do.
information
Yeah.
down below too.
Perfect. Yeah, you can basically find me anywhere on social media. I'm on Instagram as Coach Megan DeVito. It's Megan DeVito, just like Danny DeVito. I'm also on on Facebook at Coach Megan DeVito. And my podcast is called the More Than Anxiety Podcast. And it's on all the podcasting places, it's Spotify and Apple and all of that. So, and my website is just megandevito.com. So you can go to any of those places, and you are always like, my DMs are always open. You are welcome to reach out and say, hey, I'd love to schedule a consultation. I always have free consultations for people to find out, just tell me what's up. Like, what makes you anxious? Tell me what it's like. Tell me how it feels. Like, what do you wish you could do that you can't do? Why do you think you can't do that? That's always a good one. And we find the little nooks and crannies where anxiety sneaks in, and then we can talk about what it looks like for coaching. But yeah, check out the podcast. I have a new episode that comes out every Tuesday at 5 a.m. So yeah, there's what I think I said I'm on 50. I think 54 came out today, or 55, one of the two. So a little over a year. So there's several, and yeah, thank you for having me and for letting me share that.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And to our viewers,
Yeah.
I'll drop all of Megan's information down below in the description box. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Eternal Evolution of Self podcast so that we can share this far and wide, lift up and help and inspire other people. As always, thank you very much. I love you all.